Welcome to Bible Time with Grandpa. We are continuing through the book of Genesis. We are still in Genesis chapter 1. In fact, we'll end Genesis chapter 1 this morning. So if you have not done so, pause the video and read Genesis chapter 1, verses 28 to 31. All right, so we are continuing with day 6. We began day 6 in the previous video where God creates the land animals and then he creates man, which we covered in the previous video. So in this video, let's talk about the responsibility God gives to mankind right after creating the male and the female. Now, please note that the original creation, that these responsibilities are a blessing from God to man. Often we don't think of a responsibility as a blessing. But as we see in verse 28, and God blessed them, and then he gave them these responsibilities. So what is man responsible for in the original creation? The first thing is to be fruitful and multiply. Now, we will learn from the next chapter that mankind begins with a single male and female. And yes, I'm convinced of this, that all of mankind begins with a single couple. There really is no all other alternative that you could fit inside the Bible. And in fact, there's no proof of any other alternative in this world today. So this first couple does exactly what God commands here. So this first couple adds to themselves children. Then these children will have children. And then when these children have children, then we see multiplication begin to happen. So the next responsibility that God gives to man is to replenish the earth. Now there is some controversy over this word replenish as to the definition of it. And some would say that the word replenish means to refill. And so obviously we have a problem here. If these were not the first humans, why is he telling them to refill? But as you look at the older dictionaries, the dictionaries that predate evolutionary theory, the word replenish simply means to fill, not to refill. And so this was one of the ways that God blessed mankind with this responsibility to fill the earth. And we'll kind of expand upon this with the next two responsibilities. Not only was they to fill the earth, but they was to subdue the earth. The word subdue means to conquer. And so this world was clearly given to the first humans to conquer. This means that this world was theirs for the taking. It was for them to have. It was theirs to possess. This does not mean that there would be some sort of conflict to subdue it, because everything that God had made at this point was good. Now, the next responsibility God blesses man with is to have dominion over the animal kingdom. Now, these first humans were also to have dominion over the entire animal kingdom. And if you read that verse there, you see it includes the entire animal kingdom. And so to have dominion over means to rule over. So these first humans were charged with the ruling over the animal kingdom. So under the original creation, animals were in no way a threat to human existence. And God's intended purpose was that human-animal interaction would only be positive and would be enjoyable for humanity. And of course, all of this changes. We see in Genesis chapter 9, after Noah and his family gets off the ark, that this changes. And so this is one of the ways that the world has changed from before the flood and after the flood. That relationship between animal and human changed. And you see that in the first few verses there in Genesis chapter 9, which obviously we'll cover in coming videos. Next thing we see in verse 29, it tells us what man's meat is. So what is man to sustain himself with? What is he to eat? So verse 29 tells us, God says, I have given you every herb-bearing seed and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. So in the original creation, man was a vegetarian. And of course, we see, again, all of that changes after the flood. And so, again, under the original creation before the flood, man was a vegetarian. But not only man, we see the same thing for the animal kingdom. Verse 30 tells us that this was for the animal kingdom as well, that the entire animal kingdom was also vegetarian. And of course, that changes after the flood as well. And so that ends chapter 1. That ends the creation week. And it ends with God's proclamation that everything he had made was very good. And this ends the first chapter of Genesis. So here's some closing thoughts. So if you do have a Bible, go ahead and turn to Psalm chapter 8. I'm going to go ahead and read a short passage out of Psalm chapter 8. So all of God's creation was created for man's pleasure and his benefit. And so man is given great responsibilities to be a good steward over all of God's creation. And this is what we see in Psalm chapter 8, beginning in verse 6. Thou madest him, of course the him there, speaking of the very first humans. Thou madest him to have dominion over the works of thy hands. Thou hast put all things under his feet. All sheep and oxen, yea, and the beasts of the field, the fowl of the air, and the fish of the sea, and whatsoever passeth through the paths of the seas. And so there we see God's intended purpose for the original creation and the intended purpose for the original interaction that man was to have for animals. And so we will study all of this in coming chapters, and we'll see how man fails at this, and we will see the consequences of this. And of course, we live these consequences even to this day. And of course, we know the human animal interactions today are not always positive, and so I hope this was a help and a blessing to you, and hang in there as we continue through these studies. And I just want to let you know I love you. I'm praying for you. God bless you, and have a great day. Thanks.